This message comes from NPR sponsor Discover. If you use debit over credit, get Discover Cashback Debit, a checking account that rewards with cash back on everyday purchases. See terms at discover.com/cashbackdebit. Discover Bank, member FDIC.
Hello, hello. I'm Brittany Luce, and you're listening to It's Been a Minute from NPR, a show about what's going on in culture and why it doesn't happen by accident. On August 11th, 1973, hip-hop was born at a house party in the Bronx. Since then, it's been remade in the image of cities all around the world. For the genre's 50th birth year, we're diving into regionalism, the way that hip-hop sounds different depending on where it's coming from. For me, the first time I really understood regionalism was when I first stepped onto the campus of Howard University. Hanging out on the yard, I couldn't get over just how different everyone styled themselves depending on where they were from. There were the Cali girls in their silk presses despite the humidity. The PG County girls in their poetic justice braids. Kids from Atlanta and Detroit Gucci'd down to the socks.
Grab the camera!
And New York boys in crisp denim, fresh white tees, and sneakers.
The gangsters in D.C. were wearing like sweaters tied around their waist. Like, you know what I'm saying? And I was like, dang, like I wish I could do that in the town because it gets cold when the fog comes in. But the gangsters don't do that in the Bay Area.
That's Pendarvis Harshaw. He's a friend of mine from my Howard days and a native of Oakland, California.
And I'm dressing like I'm still in the town. We go to a party and I had like some glasses with the lenses poked out. And I remember people like looking at me like, who is this weird dude?
These days, Penn is a culture reporter and host of the podcast Right Nowish out of KQED. And he's here because this regionalism meant more than just fashion. It also showed up in the rap we listen to. And Penn has spent years reporting on one scene in particular that exploded out of the Bay Area in the mid-2000s, hyphy. Whether or not you know the term hyphy, you probably know the songs.
They don't need ID, blow the whistle. Blow the whistle.
Today, we're revisiting one of my favorite conversations this year. We get into how one local scene influenced the hip-hop mainstream and what gets lost when the regional style becomes part of the global melting pot. Pendarvis Harshaw, welcome to It's Been a Minute.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
It's absolutely my pleasure. We went to Howard University together. I don't even think either one of us had aspirations necessarily of working in radio at that time.
Nope.
No.
Nope.
Nope. Now here we are. You and I were at Howard at the same time when hyphy music went from being like a local subculture to being like a global phenomenon. It was like new to me at the time, but I remember everybody going up for Tell Me When to Go.
Tell me when to go. Tell me when to go. Tell me when to go. Tell me when to go.
That is a classic hyphy track from E40, who is also from the Bay. But before we get too far, how do you explain the word hyphy and the hyphy movement to people who have never heard of it before?
Hyperactive energy, rebellious to a fault. Hyphy, as a word, comes from just like, I remember it as a kid walking down the street in East Oakland, and we would walk in the middle of the street because we knew at times dogs would get loose and be like, oh yeah, you walking through Funktown, watch out, they got hella hyphy pit bulls out there. So walk in the middle of the street. And hyphy was a negative thing. It was about like badass youngsters who just didn't listen or really just hyperactive energy, and usually in a negative way. And so when it gets commercialized, it gets this like layer of like goofiness and fun and free-spirited, which is all there for sure. The hyphy movement was more or less a product, something that was commercialized. It takes the dancing, the slang, the culture, the fashion, and packages it and makes it digestible for people not from the region.
the energy, the music, the vibrancy. Talk to me about the whole hyphy scene. What was that scene like at that time for people who weren't there?
It's fun, it's goofy and all that stuff, but that's dangerous. And like living on that edge has always been a thing of it. And so even the sideshow culture, the fact that it's illegal adds some type of exhilaration to it all.
Wait, so some people might not know what sideshows are. Could you explain them quickly so we can get an idea of it?
Sideshows are car shows, and I'm not talking about just your regular like drive slow and show off your car show. You could have the ugliest car with the most powerful engine where you rev it up, come into an intersection, swing a couple donuts or figure eights or even just burn out and get out of there and kind of show off in front of folks. The sideshow usually has an audience gathered around.
Right.
And that audience could come usually at the let out of a club. People, race down the strip to an intersection in East Oakland and kind of commandeer it, really take it over and turn up for, until the cops come, pretty much.
When people talk about the creation of hip hop in New York, they talk about how noisy the city is. Being on the train constantly kind of creates this backdrop, this thumping, this endless noise, so that the music kind of naturally had to be influenced by it. It kind of had to match it and be so bombastic because New York is so intense. But then like on the other coast, when I think about like LA hip hop and G-Funk, it makes so much sense to me coming from the Detroit area because we drive everywhere. And the idea of being in a car, you want a smooth ride and you want something smooth to listen to. I don't know. I wonder, like, how was the location so crucial to the sound of hyphy?
Very much so. The way the streets are made in Northern California, they're so wide, they invite you to swang your car in them, Like, you couldn't have sideshow culture in Philadelphia where the streets are narrow, And so I talked to one of the statesmen of hip-hop in Northern California, Keek the Sneak, and he said that, like, yes, that's what separates it, is that we make music specifically for the cars. Heavy bass lines, things that you can ride around, waking your neighbors up to.
I don't put that on, that's my word. I don't put that on, that's my word. I don't put that on, that's my word.
Hyphy was born a very local scene. Hip-hop scholar S. Craig Watkins describes that era leading up to 2006 as a time when, quote, many young Californians have been pushed to the brink. You were a young Californian at that time. What were you and your friends and your peers on the brink of? Like, what was going on at that time that made life tough?
Yeah, okay, so elements. Lack of media attention for the region. You have to imagine Northern California hadn't really got national acclaim since Pac died, right? Or like I Got Five on it. And so there's like a 10-year gap before E40 comes back with Tell Me When to Go and Too Short drops Blow the Whistle.
Right.
And so that lack of media attention, people were hungry. And this place is saturated with artists. A lot of independent artists, a lot of entrepreneurs, people who feel like they're worthy to be on the level of any other artist that's coming out of New York, Atlanta, or LA, right? Secondly, you have the black population in Oakland increased every decade from the 1950s until the year 2000, and then it stopped. And then black folks are being pushed out to the suburbs. So you have this depletion of the black community and folks being more widespread.
Right.
And folks being like, I'm losing what home is.
Changes in demographics also very frequently bring changes in policing approaches, too. I imagine that affected things as well.
Yeah, there was a crackdown on sideshows. When I was a teenager, they announced that you could get your car towed for just parking 2 blocks within the sideshow area. I was like, dang, what if it's just happening in my neighborhood?
Right.
What do you mean?
The sideshow, they want to shut us down. But we'll slang something on every corner in the town. Police mad, the streets is wild. 3 o'clock in the morning and the beats is loud, man. It don't stop.
And throughout that year, Oakland experienced 148 homicides.
My gosh.
And so if I didn't know somebody, then I knew somebody who was getting killed and buried.
Mm-hmm. Like, talk to me about some of the music or songs or music lyrics, music videos from that time that kind of show that aspect, like the things that sort of had, as Craig Watkins put it, had people feeling as if they were living on the brink.
The piece that I'm working on really centers around this video. I'm laughing. This video of Stomper, the A's mascot. He's a big gray elephant, and he's at an E40 record release party in 2006, and he's dancing out in the parking lot, just like goofy dancing. It's a big goofy gray elephant, right?
Yeah.
I filmed this back in 2006, and I'm like, there's a lot to unpack here because he's dancing, and there's people dancing around him who have 5X white tees on that are airbrushed that say RIP across the chest. And I'm like, you don't think that kid isn't mourning? You know, he's out there dancing and having fun and smiling, but he has RIP with his friend's name across his chest. And I'm listening. I'm like, wait, he's dancing to E40's So Happy to Be Here.
Hard times. The struggle.
Which is a track off of My Ghetto Report Card. And the album itself is fun, up-tempo, high energy. But this one cut is E40 sitting down and being like, man, so many people not here. Like, I'm just happy to be here, you know?
I'm just happy to be here right now. A lot of my folks been locked up or laid down.
And seeing this elephant dance all goofy to it while that song is playing in the background, it's like, that's it right there. That's the problem. People think that the hyphy movement is all fun and goofy, but really, like, this is people expressing the trauma that they've been through and the fact that they're still here.
The E40 song, I mean, that's a song about survivor's remorse, you know?
Yeah.
Like survivor's guilt.
I think it wasn't survivor's remorse. It was just straight survival mode. How do I get away from this, you know? And looking back at the time now, I look at photos and I have the same button up and Steve Madden shoes on at a funeral that I do at a club event. And I'm just like,
Wow.
There was no separation between the mourning and the partying, you know? We talking about sideshows. I remember seeing people in Buicks on their dashboard. They would have RIP pamphlets from the service, you know, the handbill. And they'd have that in the front of their car as they're swinging donuts and partying. A part of the survival was mourning and celebrating all in one. And in reflection now looking back at it, I see how unique it was to the Bay Area. And I see how it's not too far-fetched. Like going back to New Orleans, like that's what second lines are about, right?
Right.
You're celebrating
Right.
and you're honoring the deceased, you know? And so it's not unheard of. I just think that our culture is looked at as like, oh yeah, hyphy movement, that was fun and goofy. I'm like, no, there's more to it. It's more than just shaking your dreads.
You know, it also kind of reminds me of how like other subcultures find ways to express grief through ways that aren't necessarily traditional, but still make total sense. Like I think about how much of a club hit Janet Jackson's Together Again was in the 90s as like a response to her losses, her friends from the AIDS crisis. Like it became an anthem for that crisis.
Dancing in the moonlight, I know you are free. I can see your star shining down on me.
And people were coming together on dance floors and being with each other, trying to almost like move through the grief together.
I love that song.
So good.
Love. That's probably top 3 Janet songs in my book.
Coming up, what happens when regional music made in response to local grief goes global?
This message comes from NPR sponsor Discover. Like using debit over credit? Think it's time to also get rewarded? Well, now you can with Discover Cashback Debit. It's a checking account that rewards everyone with cash back on everyday purchases, plus all the things you've been contemplating. So that concert, no brainer. Self-care? Yes, please. Do what you love and get cash back while you're doing it. Check out eligibility and terms at discover.com/cashbackdebit. Discover Bank, member FDIC.
Support for this podcast and the following message come from South Carolina Federal Credit Union, a member-owned financial institution serving 6 major markets across South Carolina. Their warm, welcoming, and friendly staff are eager to help you turn your financial dreams into a reality. South Carolina Federal Credit Union invites you to become part of their family today. Learn more at scfederal.org, insured by NCUA. Support for this podcast and the following message come from South Carolina Federal Credit Union, a member-owned financial institution. South Carolina Federal is dedicated to serving your financial needs and investing in the South Carolina communities where you live and work. Visit scfederal.org.
This message comes from Movement. Migration is one of the most divisive political issues, but on the podcast Movement, host Macleet Hadero approaches it with a different lens: music. Find Movement with Macleet Hadero wherever you listen.
to be a little personal, recently, a friend of mine passed away. I hadn't experienced this type of grief before, having somebody so young and so close to me pass away. And it's been so different to actually move through the ceremony of it, whether that is having a memorial service or whether that is sharing space with friends and dancing and crying together. I think for so many of us, the past 3 years, almost 4 years, 3.5 years, have been a period that has lacked a lot of those communal grieving moments. Yeah. And I've really realized in the past couple of months how necessary they are to honor the person, but also to like feel like a human being again.
My condolences on passing of your friend. I'm learning it now myself. These are the elements of processing the grief and the trauma. And these are the healthy ways to do it. The dancing in particular. When people think of hyphy dancing, they're like, oh yeah, go dumb, go stupid, shake your dreads. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, there's this thing called turf dancing. Turf dancing is like boogaloo, pop lock, strutting, telling stories, almost pantomime on beat. And most often those stories are about people who've passed. And so there's this one really popular video called Turf Dancing in the Rain, where there's a group of kids on a corner in East Oakland honoring their fallen friend while turf dancing out publicly. And it's a beautiful video. It's a great way to honor somebody's story. And physically, they're getting that energy out of their body, you know? Like all that stress is built up. Your body holds that stress. So in order to get that stress out of you, get out there, sweat, do moves, be appreciated. There's nothing like you doing a dance move and people clapping for you and how that can help rebuild you after an experience that has downed you. Yeah, it's really important. We knew it, but we didn't verbalize it back then, you know?
Yeah. I mean, grief is kind of seen as being this like straightforward process where you're supposed to go through and you follow these steps, like the Kubler-Ross method or something like that. You go through and you follow these steps and you come out fine on the other end of it. But it doesn't always look like that. It doesn't always look like a progression, right? And also, like, you don't come out fine on the other end. You come out different.
You come out new. Yeah, for sure.
The thing is, I think with that, I think a lot of people who are not from that area, I mean, I saw it as like a fun dance. You know what I'm saying? I saw it as like a fun dance, fun music, fun partying scene, but kind of having a flat read. Flat read is a great term to use. That's really good because that's what I'm saying. There's more dimensions to it. One last question. Do you still go dumb?
Do I still go dumb?
Do you? Yeah.
When my body allows me to. Doesn't happen as often as it used to.
Fair enough. Well, Pendarvis, it was so great to see you, Pen. This was so wonderful. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you.
That was Pendarvis Harshaw, a culture reporter for KQED. This episode of It's Been a Minute was produced by
Barton Girdwood,
Alexis Williams,
Liam McBain,
Corey Antonio Rose.
This episode was edited by
Jessica Plachek,
Bilal Qureshi.
Engineering support came from
Kwesi Lee.
Our executive producer is
Verilyn Williams.
Our VP of programming is
Yolanda Sanguini.
All right, that's all for this episode of It's Been a Minute from NPR. I'm Brittany Luce. Talk soon.
Support for NPR and the following message come from Rosetta Stone, the perfect app to achieve your language learning goals no matter how busy your schedule gets. It's designed to maximize study time with immersive 10-minute lessons and audio practice for your commute. Plus, tailor your learning plan for specific objectives like travel. This holiday season, get Rosetta Stone's lifetime membership for 50% off and unlimited access to 25 language courses. Learn more at rosettastone.com/NPR.
Support for NPR and the following message come from Sattva. Sattva luxury mattresses are every bit as elegant as the most expensive brands, but because they're sold online, they're about half the price. Visit SAATVA.com/NPR and save an additional $200.
Former President Trump is in serious legal trouble. And at the same time, he wants his old job back. It's a really big story. But with different trials in multiple states, with plea deals, testimony, gag orders, it's also really hard to follow. So we created Trump's Trials, a new NPR podcast where we break down the big news from each case and talk about what it means for democracy in weekly episodes. I'm Scott Detrow. Check out Trump's Trials from NPR.